A millionaire saw how his maid treated his son. What he did next changed everything. Rain fell softly over Seattle's sky, beads of mist veiling the glass. The city woke to the whisper of wind and the last amber lamps blinking over slick hills. High above, in a downtown tower, Ethan Miller's penthouse stayed as still as if it had been frozen in the night. The clock read 5:32 in the morning. He woke before the alarm, as he always did. Ethan stood at the glass wall, hands in his pockets, watching the rain draw the streets into silver threads. They called him an architectural prodigy, the CEO of a construction empire that won every bid on the West Coast, the man who could turn sky into lines. But inside his chest there was a hollow with no echo. Since Laura, the gentle wife who taught in a public school, was gone after a sudden accident 2 years ago, every victory felt like glass, dazzling, yet cold and fragile. He moved down the dark hallway, careful not to let his steps chatter on the wood. Jonathan's door was slightly ajar. The boy lay on his side, breathing even, the blanket drawn to his chest. Beside the bed, a pair of small crutches leaned against the wall like two tired soldiers after a long night. Jonathan was 8, bright, perceptive, and brave in the way children learn endurance too early. His weak legs from birth hadn't stolen the pride in his eyes. But lately, those eyes met less sunlight. Ethan pulled the blanket up and brushed a hand over his son's soft hair. He whispered, as if to himself, "I have everything, except peace." In the living room, the family photo still sat on the shelf. Laura's gentle smile, Jonathan small and clinging to her neck, and Ethan, behind them, his arm wrapping both as if making a vow. Beside the frame was a candle that hadn't been lit again. The private elevator's door sighed near the kitchen where the system had already started the coffee machine. Warm aroma slipped into the cool air. At the dining table, everything was arranged just so: silverware, napkins, a white vase. But the atmosphere was thin, as if words had been left unsaid. Victoria Hayes was still asleep. She was beautiful, fluent in the rituals of fundraisers, perfect like a pane of glass. Ethan checked his watch and drew a slow breath. The rain went on. A new day began, and inside him an old question rose again. What was slipping through his hands before he could even see it? Mornings in the penthouse unfolded like a scheduled performance. White light from the ceiling reflected off the polished dining table, and the faint clink of silverware was the only sound breaking the stillness. Victoria Hayes appeared exactly at 7, wrapped in a cream silk robe, her blonde hair loosely tied, a trace of expensive perfume filling the room. She smiled, a smile perfected in front of mirrors. "Good morning, darling," she said, kissing Ethan lightly on the cheek. He returned a faint smile. "Good morning, Jonathan," she added, her tone sweet and rehearsed. The 8-year-old boy lowered his head and murmured, "Good morning." He didn't call her Mom. Ethan hesitated, glancing between them. No one spoke again. Mrs. Ellen Carter, the longtime housekeeper, placed a plate of eggs on the table and threw a quiet, compassionate look toward Jonathan. She knew well the tension that lingered in this house. Since Victoria's arrival, nothing had felt the same. To the world, Victoria was flawless, the perfect wife beside Seattle's most admired architect, graceful, eloquent, a hostess who never misplaced a word. But once the apartment doors closed, the mask fell. Behind those polished manners hid a cold cruelty. Ellen had heard her shouting, had seen Jonathan flinch when a glass tipped over. Ethan didn't know yet, but he felt it, the growing distance between him and his son. Each morning, Jonathan ate quickly, avoiding eye contact. When Ethan asked about school, the boy replied with a single word: "Fine." When he asked where Jonathan wanted to go on weekends, the boy only shrugged. Once, Ethan caught him hiding his mother's photo inside a drawer, his small fingers brushing it like touching safety itself. At night, Ethan came home late, long after Jonathan had fallen asleep. He would stand outside his son's door, listening to the rhythm of soft breathing, then walk away with a dull ache of failure. He had promised Laura he would be a good father, that their son would never lack love. But now, inside this very home, Jonathan was slipping away, and Ethan didn't know how to reach him. One Saturday evening, while Victoria attended a gala, Ethan tried to bridge the silence. He sat beside Jonathan in the living room, handing him a cup of hot cocoa. "You miss Mom a lot, don't you?" he asked quietly. Jonathan nodded. "I wish she was still here. Things wouldn't be like this." Ethan placed a hand on his son's shoulder, but the boy kept looking out the window, where the rain fell endlessly. In that moment, Ethan realized something terrifying. He could build skyscrapers that touched the clouds, but he couldn't build a bridge to his own child. On Monday morning, Seattle's sky was a pale shade of gray. Heavy clouds drifted past the tall windows of Ethan's office on the 40th floor. He sat before the screen, but his eyes couldn't hold on to the blueprints. Lines, numbers, sketches, all blurred together beneath the weight of his thoughts. For weeks, the unease inside him had been growing. Victoria kept insisting everything was fine, that Jonathan was just going through a difficult phase. But Ethan knew something was wrong. The boy's silence, the flicker of fear in his eyes whenever his stepmother entered the room. None of it felt normal, and no matter how much he tried, Jonathan stayed locked within himself. That afternoon, Ethan's driver, Mr. Martin, came to request 2 weeks off to care for his sick mother. Ethan agreed, but as soon as the man left, an idea sparked in his mind. What if I drove Jonathan myself? That night, he sat alone in his study, the warm lamplight tracing the worry on his face. He thought of Jonathan's small crutches leaning against the wall, of his son's forced smile every morning. Maybe, if the boy didn't recognize him, he'd finally open up. Maybe then Ethan would hear the truth. The next morning, Ethan left early. He wore a plain shirt, jeans, a baseball cap, and dark sunglasses. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. A man stripped of all titles, no longer the powerful CEO everyone admired. Jonathan stepped out with Mrs. Ellen Carter, glancing up at the new driver. "Good morning, kiddo," Ethan said in a slightly deeper tone. "Name's Jack. I'll be driving you to school today." Jonathan nodded politely, still cautious. He climbed in, resting his crutches beside him. The rain followed them through the city. Ethan drove slowly, watching his son through the rearview mirror. "You like school?" he asked casually. Jonathan shrugged. "It's okay." "Does Mrs. Hayes pick you up often?" Ethan continued, keeping his tone steady. There was a pause. Then Jonathan whispered, "She doesn't like me." Ethan's grip on the wheel tightened. He looked at his son through the mirror, but Jonathan's gaze was lost in the raindrops sliding down the window. "She says I'm a bother, that I'm weak, useless. She only smiles when Dad's around." Each word struck Ethan like a blade. He clenched his jaw, forcing calm into his voice. Every instinct in him screamed to stop the car, to hold his son close. But he stayed in character. "Thank you for telling me, Jonathan," he said softly. "You're a very brave boy." Jonathan didn't answer, just nodded faintly. Outside, the rain drew silent trails down the glass, like the pain quietly running through the heart of a father who had just discovered the truth. That night, Ethan sat alone in his study, gripping a cup of cold coffee. Jonathan's words echoed through his mind like a verdict. "She only smiles when you're around." He looked around the house, the polished hallways, the spotless walls, and realized how little he truly knew about what happened inside his own home. When Victoria entered, her heels clicking softly on the floor, Ethan masked his turmoil. "You're home early," she said sweetly. Yeah, slow day. She kissed his cheek, her perfume sharp and heavy. You look tired, darling. Get some rest. Ethan simply nodded, watching her walk upstairs. Inside him, a silent decision formed. It was time to know the truth. The next morning, he called an old friend, a security expert. No one else was told. Together, they installed tiny, nearly invisible cameras, one in the living room, one in the hallway, and one near Jonathan's door. Not even Ellen knew. Ethan needed proof, not just intuition. 2 weeks passed before the cameras revealed anything. Then, on a stormy night, rain lashed the glass and thunder rolled like anger in the sky. In the dim light of his office, Ethan sat before his laptop, finally watching the truth unfold. His heart clenched the moment the first clip began. Victoria appeared on screen. No trace of sweetness left. She stood in the living room, hands on hips, face twisted with rage. In front of her was Jonathan, small, frail, leaning on his crutches. "You spilled water on the rug?" she screeched. "Do you even know how much this rug costs?" I'm sorry," the boy whispered, eyes filling with tears. "Useless!" she shouted, snatching the crutch from his hand and throwing it to the floor. "If it weren't for your father, I'd have sent you away long ago." Ethan's fists tightened, blood rushing to his temples. The footage kept playing. Jonathan crawling to retrieve his crutch while she turned away, lips curled in a cold smile. Another clip from the next day showed Ellen kneeling beside Jonathan, gently wiping his tears. "Don't cry, sweetheart. I'm here." "She hates me," Jonathan murmured. "I know," Ellen whispered back, "but someday your father will see everything." Ethan sat frozen before the screen. Every suspicion, every shadow of doubt now burned into undeniable truth. He turned off the video and buried his face in his hands. "I didn't believe my son. I let him suffer alone." In the days that followed, Ethan pretended nothing had changed. He smiled, talked, went to work, and sat through dinners with Victoria as if life was normal. But inside, everything was different. He had watched every video, seen her cruelty, heard her venomous words to Jonathan. Now he was only waiting for the right moment to act. That moment came sooner than he expected. On Friday afternoon, Mrs. Ellen Carter stepped into Ethan's office, her face pale and trembling. "Mr. Miller, Mrs. Hayes. She said I stole her jewelry." Ethan looked up. "She said what?" "She claims she lost a necklace and found it in my room. But I swear, sir, I've never touched anything that belongs to her." Her voice shook, eyes wide with fear. Ethan rose calmly. "It's all right, Ellen. Don't worry." She blinked in surprise. You believe me?" "Completely," he said firmly. Moments later, Victoria entered the room, her face a dramatic mask of outrage and hurt. "You won't believe this, Ethan. I caught her hiding my jewelry under her bed. Look." She opened a velvet box, revealing a glittering gold necklace. Ethan said nothing. He picked up his phone, pressed a few keys, and turned his laptop screen toward her. There it was, the footage from the hidden camera, clear as daylight. Victoria, in her white dress, kneeling to slip the jewelry box beneath Ellen's bed. Her face drained of color, lips trembling. "Ethan, I can explain." "No need," he interrupted, voice cold as steel. "I've seen more than you think. I saw you hurt my son. I heard every word you said to him." Victoria stepped back, trying to compose herself. "You can't use those recordings. That's a violation of privacy." "Maybe," Ethan said, his tone calm but cutting. "But I will, if that's what it takes to protect my son, and to show everyone who you really are." Silence filled the room, heavy as a storm. Then Victoria began to cry, but the tears no longer moved him. "Pack your things," Ethan said quietly. "You'll leave this house before I lose my patience." She glared at him, fury in her eyes. "You'll regret this, Ethan." "I already regret letting you stay this long," he replied flatly. When the door closed behind her, the house felt lighter, as if the air itself had exhaled. Ethan sank into his chair, weary but relieved. His eyes fell on the photo of Laura, and he whispered hoarsely, "I should have protected him sooner, but I'll never let it happen again." When Victoria left the penthouse, the silence that followed felt almost sacred. No more clicking heels on hardwood floors, no more sharp traces of perfume drifting through the rooms. Only the sound of steady rain against the glass and the soft glow of a lamp filling the living room with warmth. Ethan sat there for a long time. He knew what he had to do next mattered more than anything. He had to talk to Jonathan. He had to tell his son he believed him. He had to say he was sorry. He knocked gently on the door. "Jonathan, can I come in?" The boy looked up from his comic book, eyes still shadowed with sadness. "Yeah, sure." Ethan sat down at the edge of the bed, taking a deep breath. "Son, I know everything now." Jonathan froze. "What do you mean?" "I know what Mrs. Hayes did. I saw it all, the things you went through." The boy's hands tightened around the blanket. "You believe me, Dad? Really?" Ethan nodded, his voice thick with guilt. "I do. And I'm sorry, Jonathan. I should have believed you from the start. I was blind, and because of that, you suffered alone. I'll never let that happen again." Jonathan's lower lip trembled. "Did you send her away?" "Yes, she's gone, and she's never coming back." The boy's face crumpled, and he began to cry. Ethan pulled him close, feeling the small body tremble in his arms. "I'm here now, son. It's over. You're safe." They sat there for a long time, both crying, not from pain, but from relief. For the first time in months, Jonathan rested his head on his father's shoulder without fear. After a while, the boy asked softly, "Dad, do you think Mom's mad at you?" Ethan looked at Laura's picture on the wall, her gentle smile forever frozen in sunlight. "No, son. I think she's happy because we found our way back to each other." Jonathan smiled faintly and nodded. The next morning, Ethan woke early. He made breakfast himself, for the first time in years. The pancakes were burnt, the orange juice a little sour, but when Jonathan sat down, he laughed. "Dad, you're a terrible cook." Ethan laughed too, genuinely this time. "Yeah, but I'll get better." From a distance, Ellen watched them with tears in her eyes. The house, once cold and heavy, now echoed with laughter again. That afternoon, Ethan took Jonathan for a drive around Green Lake. The water rippled under a clear sky, washed clean by the storm. Jonathan leaned his head against the window, smiling softly. "See," Ethan said, "after every storm, the sky clears again." "Yeah," Jonathan replied, voice like a whisper. "Just like us." And in that moment, Ethan realized he hadn't just reclaimed justice for his son. He had reclaimed his own heart, the one he thought he had lost forever. That afternoon, as father and son drove back from Green Lake, Ethan felt that things were finally falling into place. Jonathan laughed more, talked more, and the shadows in his eyes had started to fade. They stopped at a small ice cream shop where Jonathan picked his favorite strawberry flavor. Both were smiling, and for a moment, Ethan believed the darkness had truly passed. But peace, sometimes, is only the prelude to another storm. On Monday morning, Ethan dropped Jonathan off at school as usual. The boy waved goodbye with a bright smile and made his way through the gate on his crutches. Ethan watched until he disappeared inside, unaware that a few hours later his world would shatter again. Around noon, his phone rang, a number from the school. When the nurse's trembling voice came through, Ethan's heart stopped. "Mr. Miller, please come immediately. Your son, Jonathan, fell down the stairs. He's in the nurse's office." Fell down the stairs? Ethan repeated, voice cracking. How bad is it? We've called an ambulance. His leg appears broken, and there's bleeding from the head. He didn't remember leaving the office. Rain had begun to fall as he sped through the streets, his heart pounding against his ribs. Images flashed through his mind. Jonathan's smile that morning, the crutches leaning by the door, the promise that he would always be safe. When Ethan arrived, the hallway was crowded with students whispering. Teachers moved quickly, their faces pale. He burst into the nurse's office. On the bed lay Jonathan, pale and motionless, his head wrapped in bandages, right leg strapped in a splint. A thin trail of dried blood stained his forehead. Ethan almost collapsed. "Son, can you hear me?" Jonathan stirred, voice weak. "Dad, I didn't fall. Tyler pushed me." The words pierced through Ethan like a blade. Tyler, the son of Chloe, Victoria's closest friend, one of Seattle's elite socialites he'd seen countless times at charity dinners. He looked down at his injured boy, at the broken crutches lying in the corner, and fury and guilt boiled together inside him. At the hospital, doctors confirmed a severe fracture and possible concussion. As Ethan waited outside the operating room, the school principal called. "Mr. Miller, we've reviewed the footage. It seems Tyler accidentally bumped into Jonathan. A simple accident." "Accident?" Ethan's voice trembled with rage. "You call pushing a disabled child down the stairs an accident?" "Please calm down, sir. Mrs. Reed insists it was just a childish prank." He hung up, trembling. Chloe, refined, powerful, manipulative, was protecting her son, as if Jonathan's pain meant nothing. Later that afternoon, she arrived at the hospital, flanked by her lawyer. "Ethan, I'm truly sorry about Jonathan, but Tyler didn't mean to hurt him. You know how children can be, just fooling around." Ethan rose from his chair, eyes like steel. "Fooling around? My son is in surgery, and you call that fooling around?" Chloe hesitated, maintaining her polite mask. "I just don't want this to be exaggerated." Ethan felt the walls closing in. The same people who once admired him now avoided his gaze. The same elite circle that praised his success now dismissed his pain. No one wanted scandal. No one wanted to defend a child who couldn't stand on his own legs. When the surgery room door finally opened, Ethan rushed in. Jonathan lay pale, still under anesthesia. The doctor said the operation went well, but recovery would take months. Ethan took his son's small hand and whispered, "I promise, I won't let anyone hurt you again. Not ever, even if I have to fight the entire world." The days after the accident passed slowly, each one heavier than the last. The hospital room echoed only with the steady beep of the heart monitor and Jonathan's faint breathing as he slept. Ethan practically lived there. Meetings, contracts, prestige, none of it mattered anymore. His world had narrowed down to 2 words: Jonathan survives. A week later, the boy woke up. The first thing he saw was his father's tearful smile. "Hey, buddy," Ethan whispered, voice trembling. "Dad, I thought I'd never see you again," Jonathan murmured. "I'm right here, son. I'm not going anywhere." After being discharged, Jonathan needed months of rest and physical therapy. When he finally returned to school, Ethan insisted on driving him every morning. He stayed watchful, wary, but soon noticed something new. Jonathan seemed calmer, even happier, as if someone at school had become his quiet protector. Her name was Grace Parker. She was the school's janitor, a woman in her early 30s, petite, with soft brown hair tied neatly back and kind eyes that carried both gentleness and history. The first time Ethan saw her was the morning Jonathan returned to class. The boy sat outside, struggling to twist open a bottle of water. Grace walked by, set her broom down, and knelt beside him. "Careful, kiddo. Let me help you," she said kindly. "Thanks," Jonathan replied shyly, No problem. I work here, around the first-floor classrooms. If you ever need something, you just call me, all right?" From that day on, Grace often stopped by Jonathan's class. She helped clean his desk, fixed his loose crutches, and sometimes brought him small treats, a muffin, an apple. She didn't talk much, but she listened, really listened, something few adults ever did. With her, Jonathan spoke freely, about his mother, about being laughed at, about his dream of running someday without crutches. Grace smiled and said softly, "You don't need to run to be strong, Jonathan. You already are." One afternoon, Ethan arrived earlier than usual to pick up his son. He found Jonathan sitting in the back courtyard, laughing while Grace knelt to tie his shoelaces. Sunlight fell across her brown hair, and something about her calm presence felt deeply familiar. Human, unpretentious, kind. Ethan watched quietly before walking closer. "You must be Grace Parker," he said. She stood a little flustered. "Yes, sir. Mr. Miller, right? I was just helping Jonathan out." "Thank you," Ethan said sincerely. "I owe you more than you know." Since the accident, he barely smiled. But today, I saw that smile again. Grace shook her head gently. "I didn't do much. Sometimes kids just need someone who listens." Ethan nodded slowly. "People often judge others by what they do, but kindness, that's worth more than any title." Her eyes softened. If everyone thought like that, the world would hurt a lot less. From then on, whenever Ethan dropped Jonathan off, he greeted Grace, sometimes with a warm coffee, sometimes just a grateful smile. Jonathan adored her. She had become his friend, his safe place. Between the three of them, a quiet bond began to form, gentle and unspoken, but real. In the days that followed, Grace's presence seemed to change the air around Jonathan. The boy laughed more, talked more, even looked forward to school again. Ethan noticed, and gratitude mingled with curiosity inside him. He wanted to understand the woman who had somehow brought his son's spirit back to life. One Friday afternoon, as he came to pick Jonathan up, Ethan saw Grace tidying the school courtyard. The sun slanted low, glinting off her brown hair. Sweat shimmered lightly on her forehead, but her smile was calm and genuine. He walked up, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Ms. Parker," he said, "I know you've been working late today. Please have a cup of coffee, my way of saying thank you." Grace hesitated, wiping her hands on her apron. "You don't have to do that, Mr. Miller." "It's not out of obligation," Ethan smiled. "It's gratitude, from both of us. Jonathan's become so much stronger because of you." Grace accepted the cup, smiling softly. "That boy already has a beautiful heart. I just helped pick up the pieces the world dropped." Ethan studied her quietly, his expression softening. "Tomorrow's Saturday. If you're free, Jonathan and I would love to take you to lunch. Nothing fancy, but I think it would make him really happy." Grace hesitated for a beat, then nodded. "I'd like that." The next day they met at a small cafe overlooking Lake Union. The sunlight streamed through wide windows, painting golden ripples across the water. Jonathan ordered his favorite strawberry pancakes, while Grace chose soup and hot tea. The atmosphere among the three felt easy, unforced. Jonathan chatted about school, laughing, and Ethan simply watched, feeling warmth seep back into the spaces inside him he thought were gone forever. Halfway through lunch, Ethan asked quietly, "Grace, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you have a calmness about you, like someone who's known pain but never let it turn her bitter." She paused, stirring her tea, her gaze distant. "I know pain very well, Mr. Miller. I lived with it for a long time." Her voice softened. 3 years ago, I lost my husband and my daughter in a car accident. I was the only one who survived. For a long time, I hated the world, and myself for surviving it. But one day I realized hate doesn't make the pain smaller. It just takes away what little light you still have. Ethan fell silent. The hum of the cafe seemed to fade. Grace continued, "So I chose to keep living, quietly, gently. Even if I have nothing left, I can still offer kindness. Maybe that's why I care so much for Jonathan. He reminds me of my little girl." Ethan's eyes softened. "You lost everything, yet you still know how to love. That's real strength." Grace smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "Maybe we're both learning to love again, aren't we, Mr. Miller?" He nodded slowly, gazing out at the water glowing gold under the setting sun. "Maybe we are." As they left, Jonathan reached out, holding Grace's hand. "I hope you'll have lunch with us again, Ms. Parker." She bent down, brushing his hair fondly. "I'd like that very much, Jonathan." Standing beside them, Ethan felt something stir within him, light and fragile, yet undeniably alive. It wasn't passion or longing. It was hope. Hope that after all the loss, two broken souls might still find each other, and love might still grow, quietly, gently, and true. In the weeks that followed, rumors spread like wildfire. At first, they were just whispers among the city's elite. Ethan Miller, the acclaimed architect, is seeing a janitor from his son's school. But soon it was clear the gossip had purpose. Someone was feeding it to the right mouths, at the right parties, in the right tone of scandalous delight. And Ethan knew exactly who was behind it. Victoria? She couldn't bear it, that he, once part of her pristine social circle, had stepped out of it for someone she considered beneath them. To her, it wasn't heartbreak, it was humiliation. On Monday morning, after dropping Jonathan off at school, Ethan received a text from Grace. "I'm fine, don't worry, just a small issue at school." His stomach tightened. He turned the car around immediately. When he entered the school's first-floor corridor, the air felt heavy. A group of parents stood gathered, Victoria and Chloe among them, dressed impeccably, dripping with perfume and disdain. In the center stood Grace, still holding her mop, her face pale but calm. Victoria smirked, her voice sharp. "How pathetic. Did you really think you could have a place beside Ethan Miller? A janitor, uneducated, invisible. Don't you feel ashamed walking next to him?" Chloe folded her arms, adding sweetly, "Let's call it what it is, Vic. This isn't romance, it's charity." A chorus of snickers followed. Grace bit her lip, her hands trembling slightly, but she stood her ground. "I've never tried to be anyone else. I'm just myself. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe that says more about you than me." Victoria's smile turned venomous. "You really think you're equal to us? You're trash, Grace Parker. And soon, Ethan will see it too." But before Grace could answer, a deep, steady voice echoed down the hall. "I already see it, Victoria, but not what you think." The hallway fell silent. Ethan stepped forward, his presence cutting through the noise like steel. He stopped before them, voice low and firm. "You can say whatever you want about me, but no one talks about Grace that way." Victoria laughed bitterly. "You're destroying your reputation for a janitor, Ethan. Do you even hear yourself?" Ethan took a step closer. "Reputation? You mean that empty title you people hide behind to justify your cruelty? I'd rather be a man with nothing, loving honestly, than live a lie among hypocrites." Chloe opened her mouth to speak, but one look from Ethan silenced her. He turned to Grace, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Grace isn't trash. She's the only one here who remembers what kindness looks like." Her eyes shimmered with tears as she tried to smile. Ethan faced the crowd again, his voice clear and unwavering. "Yes, I love her, and if anyone thinks that's wrong, I don't need your approval. From any of you." The corridor went quiet. A few parents lowered their eyes in shame, others turned away. Victoria clenched her designer purse, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. Ethan reached for Grace's hand and led her out. Sunlight poured through the windows, wrapping around them as they walked away together. Two hands clasped, steady, sure. It was a choice, simple but irrevocable. He had chosen love over appearance, truth over pretense. Just weeks after the confrontation at the school, the divorce trial between Ethan Miller and Victoria Hayes began at the King County Courthouse in Seattle. The gallery was full. Reporters, company employees, and members of the elite social circle Victoria once ruled over, all eager to witness the downfall of what had once been called a perfect marriage. Victoria entered the courtroom in her usual dazzling fashion, sleek designer dress, golden hair styled to perfection, her heels clicking arrogantly across the floor. She believed money and connections would still shield her. But the illusion shattered the moment the evidence was played. Ethan's lawyer, Robert Klein, presented everything: video recordings showing Victoria shouting at and pushing Jonathan, voice notes where she schemed to steal Ethan's shares, text messages plotting with Chloe to defame Grace. Each clip flashed on the big screen before the entire courtroom, stripping away her last layer of deception. As the evidence played, the room fell silent. The judge's voice was calm but merciless. "Mrs. Hayes, your actions are more than moral failure, they are criminal. This court is not only dissolving a marriage, it is addressing child abuse and fraud." By the time the verdict came, the outcome was no surprise. Victoria Hayes is denied any claim to marital assets. She must compensate Jonathan Miller with $250,000 for emotional harm and will face criminal charges for child abuse with separate civil liability for defamation. Victoria collapsed back into her seat, her painted face drained of color. Those who once praised her now avoided her gaze. Ethan, meanwhile, sat still, calm, relieved, and finally unburdened. When the gavel struck, he turned to his son, pulling him into his arms. "We're free now, Jonathan," he whispered, tears falling. "Finally free." Jonathan clung to him, crying, not from pain, but release. For the first time in years, they could breathe without fear. Weeks later, Ethan sold the penthouse and moved into a modest home on the outskirts of Seattle. The house, surrounded by pine trees and overlooking a quiet lake, became their sanctuary. Ellen came along, taking care of Jonathan with the warmth of a true grandmother. And Grace, now part of their lives, often stopped by, helping with dinner, reading with Jonathan, and filling the home with gentle laughter. Day by day, they became a family. Every morning began with the scent of Grace's baking. Every evening ended with Jonathan's laughter echoing through the hallways. Ethan no longer measured success in profit margins or prestige, but in moments of peace. One golden evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Ethan led Grace into the backyard garden. The breeze carried the scent of pine and the soft rustle of leaves. He took her hands, eyes glistening. "Grace, you brought light back into my life, and into Jonathan's. I don't have much left to give, only my heart. But if you'll take it, I promise to protect you for as long as I live." Grace trembled, tears shimmering. "Ethan, you don't have to say anything. I've known it all along." He opened a small box, a simple silver ring that caught the sunset's glow. "Will you marry me?" She nodded through her tears. "Yes, I will." Their wedding was small, intimate, just Ellen, Jonathan, and a few close friends. In a garden filled with white flowers, Grace wore a modest dress, holding Ethan's hands as they exchanged vows. Jonathan rushed forward, wrapping his arms around them both. "Now I have a real family," he shouted joyfully. Ethan kissed his son's hair, his voice breaking. "Yes, you do, buddy. You really do." Later that evening, when the guests had gone, the sun set behind the mountains in hues of gold and rose. Ethan and Grace sat together on the porch, fingers intertwined, watching Jonathan laugh with Ellen in the yard. "You know," Ethan said softly, I used to think being rich meant having everything." Grace leaned her head on his shoulder, smiling. "But real wealth," he continued, "is having someone who loves you even when you have nothing." The last light of the sun danced across the lake, as if blessing their new beginning, a quiet, enduring love that had risen from pain and found its home in peace.